Science is all about reason and experiment. And the reason for today's Resource Review ICT Special is to experiment with 3 primary science resources that you might want to consider. They are a CD-ROM of assessment exercises, an online encyclopedia, and an online gateway to internet teaching resources. Recommending today's resources is Kira Sewell. Kira is the PGCE Primary Programme Director at the University of Southampton. On the panel today, Colin Hinson, a freelance education consultant and broadcaster, and Helen Winter, known to everyone as H. H is the Year 5 teacher and science coordinator at Edmund Waller Primary School in South East London, and she's been trying out the resources in her classroom. Now, over in the test lab, Matthew Tosh, our resident ICT investigator, will be experimenting with the resources to show us how they all work. OK, Kira, your first choice of resource for us today is the Active Assessment CD-ROM that also comes with a booklet. Tell us about why you like this resource and what it is.
The reason I like it is there's a very big focus in schools on assessment for learning at the moment, quite rightly. And this provides I think a very good value resource that schools could use to just inspire them to use different assessment methods in the classroom. Anything that makes teachers think about the different forms of assessment, different modes that they can use, for me is a great thing, and I think this at the moment is really doing that job very well. I'll show you one of the resources that I really like. It's based on a news report, and it talks about sugar disappearing as you watch.
Right.
The children can read it through, they can decide what they're going to do, and then you can use the blank newspaper for them to write their own news sheet. So it's just a different way of reporting their findings, a different way of assessment, a nice creative way of assessment, and also that it integrates different subjects, so the literacy and the science.
Right, OK, well thank you very much for that. Now let's go over to Matthew in the test lab for a bit more of a tour of active assessment.
This little flash-based resource features a collection of thought-provoking assessment activities, and we can see what's on offer looking at our index page. Now when you first look at it, it does look a bit frightening, but actually going down the list of activities tells you what each activity relates to. Each screen is a self-contained assessment activity, and this one's asking children to describe which way a stone falls when it's dropped on different sides of the earth. Now I like this because it's not overly cluttered, the text is minimal and the diagram is easy to comprehend. I want to take you back to the index because there's a series of activity screens that have got stars next to them, and this means that you can write on the screen, you can type things in. Well, we'll have a look at this push and pull one. And in the table here, pupils are asked to write down examples of pushing. So I could type in pushing a light switch, for example. Now the problem with this screen is it asks pupils also to include a picture. Now if you look at the column there, there's not much room to put a picture in. Maybe it just wants a cartoon or something, but you'd certainly need to print it out because there's no way of drawing on the screen here. Talking of which, the print buttons are over here and allow you to print hard copies of each resource, maybe onto an overhead for use in a room that doesn't have a computer. Now the chapter index groups the activities together according to the type. So if you wanted to look for some concept cartoons, for example, you could just click on the concept cartoons button and it takes you to those resources. Now there are only 2 of each type and they don't always relate to the same area of science, which is why I think it's best to choose your resources directly from the activities list. So despite the frighteningly full index page, the resource is easy to use, and what I do like about it is it's a full screen resource, so if you're using it on an interactive whiteboard, it's really easy for all to see what's going on. And on that note, I'll hand you back to Hermione.
Well, Kira, there's certainly a lot to active assessment, but you could say that really what's on the CD-ROM isn't particularly interactive.
I agree that the element of interactivity is not great, but what it does do is provide a good value resource that starts you thinking about different methods of assessment, and that for me is its value. And then you can add to that using the resources that are available both in the book and on the CD.
Well, H, you've tried out aspects of active assessment in your classroom. How did it go down?
It went down really well. It's very, very easy to use, and there's a huge range of activities that you can use with the children in there. It gives you this sort of activity where you can give it to the children and then stand back and observe whilst they go and investigate, and then you can move on to more closed activities such as this one, which you can use, you can differentiate as well. So the first one gives the children the opportunity to go and explore and, you know, really think things through and have a go at working things out, whereas this one you would use more at the end of an activity to assess what they've really understood.
What about you, Colin? Are you a fan of this one?
I was. I mean, I was really going to pick up on the assessment part of this. Measuring learning for individual pupils is becoming increasingly important. And one of the really good ways of doing this is to make that assessment without the pupils being aware that they are being assessed.
Absolutely.
Because that takes the pressure away. So I liked this particular product because it does that active assessment with pupils without them knowing.
Yeah.
OK, well now let's move on to Kira's second choice of resource, and this is an online encyclopedia, Wikipedia. Now, Kira, this is something I'm very familiar with. Aren't most teachers aware of this resource?
I don't think they are, no. I have to say it's only something that I've started using recently. I like it because it is a good resource in terms of finding out some information, but one of the reasons that I included it is because children and anybody else can add to this resource. So children actually can feel that they're part of this evolving nature of scientific inquiry. One of the main reasons I included it is that we have to teach our children to be critical of what they read. And, you know, there is a danger that children will read anything on the web and say, well, it must be true. And I think this is a good resource to get them looking at things critically. I love the one on slugs. Because it's just got all sorts in there. I mean, there's all sorts of information. You can find out about slugs. There's nice drawings about the anatomy of a slug.
There's an awful lot of text there. I mean, how suitable is it for primary age children, really?
I think with Key Stage 2, particularly the sort of Year 5, Year 6, I think it's fine.
Well, let's go over to Matthew again and see what he thinks of Wikipedia.
Wikipedia is a well-established open source encyclopedia. It's free to access and features entries on all kinds of topics. Now on our homepage here you can see there are some subject links at the top of the page. If I click on science it takes us to a selection of subportals. Now I just want to show you what one's like by clicking on the astronomy one. And this is typical of a page in Wikipedia. You can see your text and there's plenty of colourful images as well. Now the unique thing with Wikipedia is that it is open source and it means the content is maintained by the internet using public. So if there's something I don't agree with or I don't think is correct, I can click on this editing button here and I can type in my own entry. Now of course this does leave the database open to abuse, but most of the things I've seen so far seem to be factually correct. Now the true power behind any encyclopedia is the ability to search. So I'm just going to do a search here. Let's do one for snails and see what that comes up with. And here's our page on snails. Now, after a short introduction, there's the contents section, and if I click on that, that takes us further down the page. Wherever there's an image, you can click on that, and that makes it nice and large, and you could print that out. Could be ideal for project work, for example. But going back to the main page, you can see that certain words are linked. They're hyperlinks, and these take you to other documents in Wikipedia. Now this is a powerful information resource here, but the danger is you could get sidetracked and go off at a tangent and start browsing completely unrelated topics. The one thing I will say is if you're using it with primary children is that some of the language might be a little bit high level, so it's well worth doing a preliminary search before you let your class loose on this website. Hermione.
Well, H, how did you find Wikipedia with your children?
On a personal level, I found it very helpful having moved from Year 6 teacher to Year 5. There were lots of topics that I'd not taught before, so I used it initially to do research
So it's a
for
teaching
myself.
resource. Yeah, it's great.
In terms of working with the children, you need to understand that within a Year 5 class or any class, you've got such a breadth of ability, reading ability, that some children, there is no way that they could access this independently. There are some who are very able readers who could make good use of it, lots of information, and could be trusted to stay within the, you know, where you want them to be. But there are some children in my class who just would not be able to use this without a teaching assistant or a teacher with them.
Colin, what do you think of this resource?
If you're going to use this, it has to be tightly controlled. There are so many what-ifs, you know, with this. They will go off at a tangent. The content can be unsuitable, the language level is a problem, and so on.
I don't disagree with you there, but I do think sometimes we've got to give things that are a little bit unsafe in terms of letting children go off at tangents. There are times when we just have to let them have their own lead. But I do agree that there is some language that is too difficult. There are some things that I would not want them to see, and that's where the control comes in. So I do agree with you to a point, but I think let's just let them push the boundaries.
So it's mostly the critical use, you know, that because it's a wiki, you know, anyone can contribute to it, and that creates a problem in itself.
Absolutely.
Because you're not quite sure about the reliability of the content.
Benefit is it's free,
Yeah.
so teachers should go and have a look.
Absolutely.
OK, well, time now to move on to Kira's third choice of resource, and this is an online gateway to some teaching materials. It's called Top Marks. Tell us about this one, Kira.
It's a search engine that's actually designed by teachers. So you know when you put something in there that you are going to get something which is fairly reliable. You can search in all sorts of subjects, you can choose your subject, you can choose your age group. The thing I want to have a look at now is the interactive whiteboard resources. So if we click on primary science and we have a look on Key Stage 2, I'm going to choose one called Life Cycles.
Right.
And it has an interactive whiteboard. It tells you all the instructions, but we're just going to have a look at part 2 of this. And basically the children can use this to drag and drop. They can either do it on the computer or just using the whiteboard.
OK, well, H, did you think this was a good one?
I thought it was great. I didn't know it existed until I was asked to review it for today. And being new to Year 5, as I've said, there were some things on there that just made my life so much easier. I'm able to use an interactive whiteboard, but I find designing the activities more tricky, and also finding the time to design it. And on here, there's so many things that I would have wanted to create, and they're there for you, and it's so easy to find. So, for example, this one here about the planets, I've always found it very difficult to remember the order of the planets. And on here, it's a click and drag activity, so you can get it wrong. There is a mnemonics table as well, which you can bring in.
Colin, what do you think of this resource?
Well, I was actually looking at the Top Marks website itself as a portal, which is what I was actually concentrating on. And I was looking at it and thinking, what does this do that Curriculum Online doesn't do? Why have this when Curriculum Online is there? Curriculum Online has far more resources in terms of links to science websites, teachers' comments, and all sorts of things, free and priced ones as well.
Well, then, a final comment from you on that, Kira.
I just like the website. I think Curriculum Online, you have to search for things a little bit harder. This is here, you can put a word in, you can search for it, you can search by age group, and it's all there for you.
OK, well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. But just to recap, the 3 resources that we've looked at are Active Assessment from David Fulton Publishers, which is part of Routledge. Wikipedia from Wikimedia Foundation, Inc. And Top Marks from Top Marks Education. For more information about the resources we've featured today, go to our website. It's teachers.tv/resource review, or if you want to, email us, resourcereview@teachers.tv. A very big thank you to our panel, to Kira, to H and to Colin. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Resource Review. Bye-bye.